This is for the book lovers. Hi, I'm Nabiri.
Hi, I'm Marcella.
And welcome to Bookish Banter.
Okay, so today we're going to discuss a book called Homegoing, and it's a book I had recommended earlier on by Yaa Gyasi. She's a Ghanaian stroke American author. And Homegoing is actually a very, very interesting book because the theme is premised on slavery. It has a lot of history from like the age of transatlantic slave trade, all the way to the 20th century. And it talks about institutional racism in America. And so, just with this, I'd like to say, I would rate it 5 over 5, because I thought it captures the whole essence. The way she wrote the book, it captures the whole essence of this journey from Africans, the way we were living here, to slave trade or like normal trade business, and then the shipping, the Jim Crow, the beating of black people, the selling of black people, then institutional racism into modern America. And that is just awesome, in my opinion. So that's why I would rate it 5. In your opinion, what do you think would rate the book?
I also really like Homegoing. This was a reread for me because I'd read it before. Yeah, and I just like that even the second time reading it, it still hits the same. It's still a really good book. And it was also a 5-star read for myself as well. The first time and this time as well. I like how she, as you said, captured like literally 8 generations, like from back then to, because they're talking about like 1800s and stuff like that, to current day where it's like 2000s, where there's technology and all these things, there's changes, and just the full circle moment of how it began, and because it's two sisters, and how after all these 2 generations, these two people came to sort of come back home, which in this case is Africa, and also the eagerness to explore their roots, which essentially did bring them back. And for those who didn't really leave, they're wanting to stay tied to their roots and understanding where they came from. So I'll say it was also very well written. It's a historical book, but it also has so many different facets of just life in itself.
Yeah.
Just breaking down how, and we were speaking about this before, how one of your decision as an individual impacts so many of your other generations going down.
Yes.
Something that you might see is a solo decision that you're doing this for you might impact the other people behind you negatively, and something that maybe you sort of were forced into tends to impact other people positively. So yeah, at the end of the day, no decision is just solely yours and doesn't just affect you. So it's so well written, so well broken down.
Yeah.
There's a bit of the suspense where after every sort of generation, you feel like I'd have wanted to know more, but her writing style was written so uniquely, and it told such a beautiful story.
Yeah. Actually, just basing on what you've just said, the book itself has every chapter is a child of a different generation.
Yeah.
Like they go inter what is the word? Interchanging.
Interchanging,
Yes.
yeah.
So if it's generation this one today, generation this one the next. And the way she matches these stories is so well, like you cannot even see like there's like a breakdown anywhere, right? And I think that actually builds the whole story, considering that this is actually a fiction. Like this is fiction. This is something she sat down and probably she's done research on cultural identity and whatnot to come up with this at that time and in this time. That's magnificent for me,
Yeah,
honestly.
super
Yes.
super mag. I think
Yeah.
it's that part of fiction where it's not necessarily true for these people,
Yeah.
but it's pulling from facts of things
Different.
that happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, as I said before, like it's literally
Different
history.
facets.
So this is
Yeah.
history that's happened, that is happening. So all these things, like we all know there was slavery. We all know currently there's racism. We
Yeah.
all know like some people can't really root back so many generations back,
Yeah.
because you'll find if you were to sort of draw your family tree, it stops somewhere because that's all you know.
Yeah.
But for us being the readers and being in the heads of all these different people, then we can easily trace it.
Yeah.
But like for them, it's not really, it can't really be traced that far back. But it
Yes.
was so beautiful how it was written and how it all started from, of course, every family tree will start with like two people, because it
Yeah.
takes two people to
To
create one.
build.
So yeah, so it started
Yeah.
like the mother, and then just the tree kept
Goes,
falling,
yeah.
kept falling. And of course, the tree could widen, but for the book, she just chose to stick to one child
A
of each
specific.
generation
Yeah.
and just show how this is slowly, but slowly and surely leading them back to home,
Where home
as the
is.
name would suggest of the book, which I felt it was also something that is such simple but smart wordplay of how she just
Definitely.
named the book
Homegoing.
Homegoing.
We're
Yeah,
gonna get to that particular point.
yeah,
But right before we talk about these different places in the book, we would want to say that there are a few triggers, just in case you want to read the book. The triggers here, what I found was like rape, some aspects of rape, sexual assault. I think there is what is it murder somewhere? No. Yes, the prisoners, they were being like killed.
yeah. I
I
think
mean,
there is such triggers. And what else?
there's drug addiction, there's also homophobia. So right before you get into this book, maybe consider, are these things that are gonna like trigger you while
Yeah.
reading the book?
There's police brutality.
Yes.
But I'll say the book does have a lot of heavy topics, but how she approached them was from a very uh uh caring point of view. Like, it's not too extreme, but it
Considerate.
also did get the point across.
Yeah.
And still, I think in this day and age, some of these things, if anything, are on the news, and or in your history classes. These are things that have happened. It's not fiction where it's imagination, it's
Yeah.
fiction where she's pulling from things that have
That are
happened, that are
existing,
happening. So
for sure.
yeah, there's all these triggers, but it's also such an eye opener of for you to take time to understand the history of another person and why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And why for them some things are so much bigger. So it sort of helps you understand who they are.
What position even like they take in life, yes. So also now moving from this general view, I think let's go back to what is the story, right? Like, who are these people? How is the story unfolding? It starts with two half sisters. There's Essie and Efia. It's grounded in this African Ghanaian tribes, Asante, Fante, and they had all of this. It's just a typical African community, really, where there's trading with different communities. There's the issue of what different kingdoms and power, and just that kind of context, right?
Yeah.
So Essie and Efia come from this lady called Mame, and Mame is a woman who was also raped when she was working for the some guy who's now the father of Ifia, and she I think she burnt the house, right? And then ran away. But then when she ran away, she went to start a whole family elsewhere with another guy who's also like, he's called Big Man. So in this context of Big Man means he's also doing trade. The difference between these two particular communities or groups of people is Big Man is doing trade with people, like he's trading people. Okay, they're the ones who go fight in that town. They steal people, put them in cells, then sell them to like the British soldiers. And then on the side of Kobe, these people, I don't think they were fighting or anything, but their form of trade was, I think the story on the side of Ifia was more of women being married to the British soldiers rather than them selling people, right?
No, they were.
They used to sell
Because
people.
on Efia's side,
Mhm.
it's the Efia's father wasn't a chief,
Yeah.
but the chief of the
A bit.
of the community was, he sort of got into like an
Coalition,
agreement. Yeah, a coalition actually is what I'm looking for, with the British people. So they did sort of strike a deal
Yes,
where
I remember.
they're going to work through this, and they'll be making, of course, money at the end of it, and also
Yeah,
power.
obviously, because
And
it's
just, I think,
trade.
one thing that you did say for him, it was the power thing, where he's controlling the narrative
Yes.
of how this slave trade occurs.
Mhm.
So yeah, they were also very much into it. It's just that on Efia's side, it was being led by the chief, because the father wanted Efia to be the chief's bride.
Yes.
But that didn't happen.
It didn't happen
because the
because
stepmom.
Baba, yes,
Yeah.
Baba, who's now the stepmom, now decides, no, she has to get married to
Yeah, yeah. So
a British.
on literally both sides, the men, as because it was like patriarchal,
Yeah.
then, and the women didn't have too much power, but the men who were in power were using slave trade as a point of making negotiations. So because you want to stay in power, you want to control the narrative, and you want the British people to sort of be on your side. Yeah, so I'll say the chief on this end was more collaborative, where they were working together.
Yes.
And Big Man on the other end was more, they
He was
were
fighting, probably.
fighting, and yeah, but they used to enslave Africans themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, so this was a heavy thing in the beginning, where on both sides, slavery, they were all maneuvering slavery in different ways.
Yeah.
But it was slavery regardless.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the most interesting thing that Yaa did here was, Efia gets married to a British soldier, right? Who called James Collins, who takes her to the castle. The castle is now where they used to do all this trade, and all the British soldiers like live there, and all of this thing. Actually, it was close to the beach where the ships used to pick the slaves who lived under the castle. And then why it is interesting is because Essie later, when you read the book, is picked from her home, and is enslaved in the same castle, right? You remember now, Essie and Efia are half sisters. She's enslaved, and she lives under just right under, in the dungeons, I think, if I could call it dungeons. And this place is a place of torture. Like, these women, it's just hectic. There's rape from the British soldiers. And I remember I think maybe in my understanding of the book, the British used to just look at them as like things. They don't see them as beings, as humans. And I remember Efia at one point thinking, does James Collins also come home and look at me and think the same way he looks at those people he sees, probably Uko slaves and whatnot? That's also like something like a conundrum. But then it's very interesting how these two coexist and how they never get to meet. And from there, that's what builds this trajectory of Efia's family now being predominantly in Africa, right? And they are like royals, if I may. And then now Essie moves into this trajectory of enslavement from Africa all the way to the States now. They were carried using ships now. So yeah, so where did I reach in terms of the story? Oh, so now, with all of this happening, Yaa now continues explaining per generation. So as Essie moves from Africa, and I think she's pregnant, right? And she's pregnant of the guy who raped her, right?
Raped, yeah.
She was raped also by a British soldier. Yo. So she moved, and she gets to America, and she has the baby. But then I think the baby is taken away from her, right? Or what happens? Does she raise the baby at one point?
Yeah, she raised the baby for a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, until they were separated.
And that happened a lot, because if you actually look at the history, now we're not going to go into history, but if you look at different facets of slavery that we've seen in America, or in those kinds of places, is they live in a rich man's, or a rich white man's, yard, or like homestead, where they farm, or they were picking, is it cotton?
Yeah.
Right? So, and then now you are a slave. You are the slave to these people, ideally. So they can do whatever they want to do with you, and these people, you can see even within the story, there's themes of anger, there's theme of um it's just the way that they hold on to this trip that they had from during the ship. It was so hard. It was so, like, what's the word? Heartbreaking, because you can see Essie no longer speaks. If you look at the story of Ness, Ness explains about Ness is now Essie's daughter. She says Essie was really hard. Like, she never smiled ever, because she, in her head, she's coming from a lot of slavery, like brutal treatment, all the way from Africa and whatnot. She never used to smile, and that's what she picked also. And this is generational now. If you can actually follow the story elsewhere, down the line of Ness and the whole, they carry this. And also, we didn't mention about the lock. It's called the rock.
Black rock.
Yes,
Yeah.
the rock itself also signifies that Mame wanted these kids to, maybe in her when she was seated somewhere, probably she was thinking, okay, so let me just give these kids one time, maybe they will find themselves, or someone is going to explain that this was from your mom, or. But Essie loses her rock, and that's it. She loses her rock in Africa. So when she's in America, that doesn't happen. But Efia maintains that,
Yeah.
in remembrance of her mommy, which now is now taken from generation to generation. Which now, if you look at the book later, you will find that the last person, Marjorie, has it now, and she's symbolizing, and it's a symbol of growth. It's a symbol of family. It's a symbol of what's the word? Interconnectedness of the generations, something of that sort. I don't know what I want to say there, but I hope you've understood. Yes. So yeah. Anyway, but that's me. What did you think about the book? Do you see how these different facets are intermingling with each other?
Yeah.
Do you have like something like probably that shocked you, or not even shocking, because I don't think it was shocking per se, maybe wowed you during this whole journey from Essie to Marcus now, because Marcus is the last person in the book, or Efia to Marjorie?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say with this book, I feel it's one of those books that you need to have a family tree, which is something that I did. And I've spoken about it before, which is one of the things that did get me with this book, is how the choices of one person affected how the generations would go through, like, later on.
Yeah.
For example, okay, for Effie, I don't think necessarily it was her decision per se to get married to a white person, because she did want to, because her father loved and adored her, and she wanted to do what he said, and he wanted the best for her, which in this case was being the bride of a black man. And in this book, one of the themes that is very repetitive is a lot of polygamy was happening, where like men just tended to have a lot of kids and a lot of wives, and it's something that was how things happened back then, so it wasn't really an issue. Yeah, so for her, with the scheming of her stepmother, she did instead get married to a white person, but this white person loved her and treated her really well, which worked well for her. And I'll say the only good thing that her stepmom did for her was giving her the black rock and telling her that this is a gift. She assumed it was a gift from the stepmom, but essentially it was a gift from her mother, and something that she really held on to. So with her then came her son, who sort of had like an experimental gay phase with a friend, which was immediately posed by the dad, and he was quickly sent
To
abroad.
London,
But something that I did note with when he came back to Africa, because the uncle did send for him, because the dad passed on a few. When he came back to Africa, his uncle sort of had his life plotted out for him. Like, you are, as you said, you're royalty. You need to get married to this
Behave,
person,
yeah.
and even like their marriages and everything were because of power. Like his marriage union was, you will marry this. They kidnapped the a daughter of royalty as well,
Yes,
and it was
Nana.
like a political statement. Like, this
Yeah,
is a powerful union. That's why you're doing this, and he didn't object to anything, and
yeah.
he did it, and he went with the instructions of his uncle, which worked for him and his family. I mean, him and the wife, they hated each other.
Yeah, they
But
didn't necessarily like each other.
they hated each other, and it
You
was
know,
so obvious because the wife would repeatedly call him weak in
weak.
front of the son.
Yes.
And now the son picked this up and he wanted to do the opposite, because for him now he chose to marry for love.
Yes.
But with marrying for love, it meant faking his death first of all, and just letting go of all the riches. So now the choice of now his name was James. The
James,
choice
yeah.
of this son affected his kids, because now his child grew up in poverty with a dad who's not known. Because I'll say in Africa, your name means a lot. Your name is
Yeah.
essentially your status.
Yeah.
You not having a name means you're nobody. So because where have you come from? Hence, like, again, this entire book where it's being tied to so many generations. So why are you without an origin?
Yes.
Who are you? And that in itself really affected how the generations went on from there, because for the daughter, he was named in this place as the unlucky one. So who are you? Where do you come from? And then just coincidentally, he also just had the worst luck
Yeah.
in the whole place, so he couldn't feed his family, and his daughter sort
I
of
mean,
ended up she said in the book she felt like she was 25 and unmarried. I mean, in this current world and society, 25 is considered young.
yeah.
Like, nobody is rushing to get married at 25.
We are all kids at
Yeah.
25.
Exactly, we're children. But for her then, it was
It was
sort
a
of,
big
yeah,
deal
she was
because
looked at
even
as
of
like, what
the
do you mean?
society at that
Yeah,
time,
you
yeah,
don't have suitors. And something that was mentioned to her is nobody wants to marry a woman who doesn't have an
hasn't.
origin.
Oh gosh.
Like, where do you come from?
Yeah.
And it's the fact that she sort of wanted to go and see these places where the father has come from. Because him, he was like, me, I made the choice to leave because I didn't want to take part in this slave trade that my family was doing.
Yeah.
I chose a different path.
Path.
But now it's affected you, and it's affected you in the worst way, because it's like she was pleading for her best friend to marry her, and he just kept saying, wait, wait. And she ended up waiting 7 years and getting pregnant,
Yeah.
and still not getting the
getting
guy.
married.
And he's still telling her
Just wait.
to wait. So it really, really affected her. So I'll say again, it just goes back, because I'm going down this like Efia's generations,
Generation.
so to say. So again, it affected her daughter, because the best instance for her she did see was to take her daughter to be raised in the missionaries, and I think she committed suicide. So you see, now her daughter has a thing, and back then there's a way how the same way they look at the white person is the same way that they'd approach you being raised in the missionaries.
Yeah.
Because what do you mean you're raised by white people? So you don't
I mean,
know
you
anything.
also have like white
Yeah,
tendencies.
you don't know anything about our culture. You know
Yeah.
things that they have told you, because you'd be quoting the Bible and such
Most
things.
often,
Like,
yeah.
how whitewashed are you? Is a question that was asked. And then another common thing that is mentioned in this book is the fire which started in the beginning.
Yeah.
When the mom was initially running away, she set fire to the house and everything.
Yeah.
So fire was a big theme.
It's been used so many places.
Yeah. And Akua, who was daughter of Abena, kept having these dreams over and over again. And with these dreams, she accidentally, or in the dream, just the confusion of dream and reality,
she burnt her 2 kids.
Yeah, burnt her 2 kids, and then her son has all these
marks.
all these scars.
Also,
and
she's also
everything.
like scarred from like her legs downwards.
Yeah, and then it's one of those things, because for her she felt like she's dreaming, but is she really?
Yeah.
So there's so many decisions that you make
that could potentially
affect so many
your
generations.
children,
Yeah.
children's children.
And while making them, you're thinking this is a solo decision.
Yeah.
That is for me. I'm doing this for me, but at the end of the day, you end up affecting so many others. And also just the withholding reasoning, because if a decision is going to affect other people, at least tell them why you did this.
Why it
You
makes
know,
sense to you.
yeah, because like the dad running away from slave trade and everything and cutting the ties with his family, it was good that it was a decision for himself, but at least explain it once they're of age to your children. Then let it, because at the end of the day, family is family.
Yeah.
Let them know I cut my ties because they were participating in slave trade, but you can still go see your grandmother. You can still do this, like, these are your people. Especially because you never really know, you don't want like them to get involved with, and then you're trying to tell them that's your cousin or that's your brother, so you'd rather just tell
There's
them.
this power of storytelling, which I don't know, for some reason just ended somewhere. But that aspect of actually saying, so I did this. I made a decision to marry your dad because of ABC and D. I made a decision. Now this is just in the general context of life. Those choices, yes, some philosopher somewhere would say there's no right or wrong choice. Okay. However, yes, vile unasema, explaining the reasoning behind that particular choice would potentially like save a lot of mental distress from generations,
Yeah.
and people, and they will understand, right? Even for Akua, I mean, it was a really sad part for her because burning her children, of course, she wouldn't want to,
Yeah.
right? Like, which mom wants to burn her kids? No, but not in the context of her brain working the way it was working, and the fact that fire also is a very major thing in this whole story. They would have had that kind of an explanation of, I've been having dreams and this could be about this and this was my decision, but people shunned her, even like,
No, even
she's a
before that,
crazy
people,
woman,
yeah,
even
even before the burning of her kids, people used to call her
crazy.
crazy, but she still used to get the dreams. And I think it's just the understanding the root cause of the dream. She was just shunned so often that, and then it's something that she really cannot, because dreams is not something you can control or explain.
Yeah,
You sort of
yeah.
sometimes need to sit down and understand, why is it that I'm getting these dreams, if she did have somebody to ask. But now you see, for her, she couldn't go any further back because her mother was dead.
Yeah.
Her mother's parents were dead, and her mother's parents are the ones who cut off the rest of the generations.
Yeah.
That's why, if there's somebody to, because before that, with James, he could speak about his grandmother, he could speak about his father. So there might be all this animosity, but if you cut off the lineage, where I can't look any further back, then I don't have anybody to ask, especially because at some point Abena and Akua were both only children, so they don't have anybody else to sort of
To tell the
lean on,
story,
yeah,
okay.
to sort of rewind back,
yes,
yeah,
backtrack or something.
yeah, because also to the point of the slavery, on this other end, where the ones who were sort of sort of shipped to the States, and they were working in the cotton fields and everything, they made sure to have the connect, because in Ness's story, where they they were separated from their kid after trying to escape, her and her husband, and then they were separated, but she was able to hand over her son.
She was called who, that mama? I can't remember.
Um, what? No.
Aku.
Yes,
Mama or something.
yes, Maako. So Ness was able to hand over her son, but even with the handing over her son, she wasn't forgotten. You get, because this woman who was able to raise her son was able to say, listen, I'm raising you, but I'm not your
real mom.
Yeah, I'm not your real mom.
Yeah.
And this is your mother, this is
This
your
is what
father,
happened.
this is what happened.
Yeah.
So even him growing up, he always knew, and he always had his history. He knew, this is my name, I was named by my parents. Even by the time he was sort of raising his family, he knows where I've come from. So there was that string, the string wasn't cut off.
Yeah.
By the time he's having his story and everything, I feel like his story was one of the saddest stories, especially at that time where they have freedom, because he even had the name.
Yeah,
Yeah, free
Freeman.
man. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the laws are changed.
Mm.
Suddenly they're being captured if they escaped, and he knew he was an escapee.
Yeah.
And he had that fear of, what if they capture me, because the wife, and they had 7 kids and an eighth one on the way.
Yeah.
So the wife and all the kids were free, but he had that fear. But yet it's the wife who was captured.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't. So as well as having that
And
guilt
that
and
affected him
everything,
also.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you can imagine that will
7
definitely
kids.
affect you. Because now, of course, the generation will continue with all these other 7 kids, and we didn't get their stories, but we know like the generation, because a few of his kids did have kids. But the author chose to continue with the last one, who was called H, who also was able to at least tie from what he knows.
Yeah.
Because of course, with what the mother went through, being kidnapped and separated from all her 7 kids, she's not in the best state of mind and everything. But he was also able to build up on their generation, where H worked hard and everything and got his woman. Then from H we have the next one, I think, Willie and Sony and Marcus.
Just continuing with that is, you see, Yaa explains the trajectory of how the blacks are being treated in America in this point in time. The institutional racism, it goes on with them working in mines, in the coal mines, the pay, the mistreatment in the streets of Harlem, the shooting of those people,
and how their crimes are seen as, like, they're multiplied to be such huge crimes,
Great,
even if it's the same thing with like a white person.
yeah.
And how for some of them, like the one who white passing, like he's so light he looks like he's white. So the fact that he walked into some place and people thought he was white, he started actually passing for white. And eventually he ended up leaving his black woman and going and starting a whole other white family. And this is, of course, something that at the time, this is somebody who did it to survive, to be able to push through and live another day. So they're just forced and pushed to do such extreme things.
Yeah. Which now reaches to a point where we're gonna conclude with these two characters, who are Marjorie and Marcus. Marcus is of the SC family, right?
Yes.
And then Marjorie is of Efia, of the Efia side. But Marjorie is in the States, and also Marcus is in the States. Marjorie, if you can remember now, Marjorie has roots back here with
in Africa.
With
they have gotten to the place where
the show she's called
Akua.
Akua.
Yeah. So after the parents have the privilege, because they're
travel.
now not even just travel. As Africans, you can get the education, and if you have the money, you can be able to get the best that you want, which is essentially what the parents did, because we are getting the best for you. But they taught her everything. Like, she knows her roots.
About Africa.
And she knew she was from Africa, even living in the States.
She also even has an accent. If you can see people in her school asking, also, you're black, but
why are you talking?
Like, what type of black is this? Because you're not talking like the rest of the black Americans.
Yeah.
But so in conclusion, really, is this book ends on I feel like it was a bit of a reconciliatory tone, but it still leaves us with a question of, like, what if, like, what these people, they've brushed into history from, they are people of the same family, brushing into history again. What a coincidence, right? And Marjorie and Marcus meet in some museum, and Marcus can feel there's something more than just being a friend, or there's something more than just,
both of them,
right? They can feel this thing going on, and then now they decide now to. Oh, so Marcus is doing a paper, PhD in sociology. This one is doing a paper on African and African American literature based. So when they come here to Africa, she takes him to the beach at the coast at Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And the author here does a magnificent thing where she says the rock that Marjorie is wearing, the one that she was given, that has been dropped
Passed
down,
from
yes, from
generation.
generation to generation. She takes it and places it on Marcus. And if you have read this book, you will know
And
how
says, "Welcome
much.
home."
And in fact, yes, and she says, "Welcome home." You can, if you have read this book, you'll understand how big of an event this is, because this is home. This is home
Yeah.
for Marcus. This is home for,
Marjorie.
like they've gone through slavery, and nobody would have ever thought that one of their people would come back home.
Yeah, I think also something else that is big, especially in that point, is just the curiosity. Because for both of them actually, because you can be living in the States or somewhere else, but the curiosity of wanting to know where you came from, the curiosity of actually coming to
And
where you came from, and
yes.
just understanding.
What
And as
happened.
much as this is what they are studying, they actually did want to understand why is this happening, where did I come from, what essentially are my roots, as in I live here now, I understand slavery and the journey of the whole thing. Of course they wouldn't be able to root it all the way to
Directly.
Efia and to
Essie.
Essie, but just having like that, this is where I came from, I understand that I'm from here, I understand my journey. It also gets a bit more personal when it's like, okay, this is a journey that my people went through, when it's just not history, when you understand, and it's a bit more broken
It's
down.
about me and my people.
Yeah, and something else that she spoke about, Efia speaks Twi, and I think Essie speaks, I'm forgetting, but they were both wanting to also learn a bit of their language, just mix with the people, and the fact that they just felt that there's just
a
something,
connection
there's just a
somewhere.
connection. It's not romantic, it's not anything like that, there's just a connection here.
Mm.
It was just so well and beautifully done.
Yes. So I've just been taken off guard, of course. I don't know. anyways, we were trying to say that even putting this title Homegoing is a magnificent way, considering that this is our first book for Yaa Gyasi, and Homegoing, as you can see, is we are coming back, like home.
Tunarudi nyumbani.
Tuna come home. Like from the very beginning, the journey is we've left, but we are coming back.
Yeah, and then also that is just to add on, also just the different stories. Like she deeply dives into every individual person's story. Like you get to understand the Kojo, you get to understand the Ness, you get to understand the one who didn't smile, why don't they smile?
Yeah.
The one who was separated from the wife, you get to understand. The one who had to pass off as a white person, you get to understand the one who had to live with a scar on their face because of what the mistakes of the mother. Like there's so many. The build up is amazing. The individual stories are it's like Legos. It fits so well together. Like it's just so perfectly written, so well explained. It's not a rushed book.
Yeah.
A great job.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll conclude by something she said in an interview. I'm gonna read. So she says, I felt like unless you could feel the sweep of time as you read the novel, you would miss how things persist. We aren't we aren't past history at all. Everything has bearing on the present, which is exactly what we've been talking about here: decisions and choices.
Exactly, yeah. It speaks on so many things so well, and it's the struggles of then versus the struggle of now. Sometimes the struggles are not in your control, but you'd find with some of the struggles like that they had, like drug abuse, it's in your control, but what can you do to do better?
For sure.
So well done. So well put. Yeah.
will recommend. So go read about it and tell us in the comments if you liked the book. Tell us what you liked about the book. If you would recommend to your friends. Yeah. And thank you so much for listening in, and adios.
Bye bye.